On a chilly autumn morning, Rachel Chen hurried along her usual route to work, clutching her coffee cup close to her chest. The steam rose in wisps against the crisp air as she navigated the busy sidewalks of downtown. Like most mornings, she was lost in thought about the day ahead, client meetings, deadlines, and the endless stream of emails waiting in her inbox. Rachel had walked this same path for 3 years now, past the same storefronts, the same newspaper stand where Mr. Wilson always waved hello, and the same crowd of hurried professionals clutching their phones and briefcases. But today was different. Something made her slow her pace and take notice of her surroundings. As she approached the old brick building that housed the local bookstore, she spotted someone she hadn't seen before. In the recessed doorway of a closed-down shop, a woman sat wrapped in layers of worn clothing. Unlike many homeless people Rachel had passed by before, this woman sat with an almost regal posture, her chin held high despite her circumstances. The woman's silver-streaked hair was neatly combed, and her clothes, though clearly old and worn, were clean and carefully arranged. She wasn't asking for money or holding any sign. Instead, she was reading a tattered paperback book, completely absorbed in its pages. Rachel found herself slowing down, drawn by the unusual sight. The woman must have felt her gaze because she looked up from her book and their eyes met. The unexpected warmth in the woman's smile caught Rachel off guard. There was something in those eyes, wisdom, dignity, and a hint of something else Rachel couldn't quite place. That brief moment stayed with Rachel throughout her day at work. During her lunch break, while sorting through spreadsheets, she found herself wondering about the mysterious woman. What was her story? How did someone who carried themselves with such dignity end up on the streets? The next morning, Rachel left her apartment a few minutes earlier than usual. She told herself it was because she wanted to stop for an extra coffee, but deep down, she knew she was hoping to see the woman again. Sure enough, there she was in the same doorway, this time with a different book in hand. As Rachel passed by, she noticed more details. The woman's hands were clean and well-maintained, with traces of what might have once been a professional manicure. A delicate silver chain peeked out from beneath her layers of clothing, suggesting a life once lived very differently from her current circumstances. That evening, while preparing dinner in her small apartment, Rachel couldn't shake the image of the woman from her mind. She thought about how many times she had walked past homeless people without really seeing them, without considering their stories or the twists of fate that might have led them there. The rest of the week followed a similar pattern. Each morning, Rachel would spot the woman in her usual place, always reading, always maintaining that same dignified posture. Sometimes their eyes would meet, and they would exchange small smiles, like neighbors acknowledging each other across a fence. By Friday, Rachel had noticed something else. Unlike other homeless people in the area, this woman never asked for anything. She never held out a cup or displayed a sign requesting help. She simply sat there, lost in her books, as if she had carved out her own little world in that doorway. That evening, as Rachel prepared for the weekend, she made a decision. The next time she passed by the woman, she would stop. She would do more than just smile and walk past. There was something about this particular person that spoke to her that made her want to reach out and connect. As she lay in bed that night, Rachel thought about how easy it was to become wrapped up in our own lives, to see without really seeing. The woman in the doorway had unwittingly broken through that bubble, making Rachel question her own assumptions about homeless people and the stories they might carry. She remembered something her grandmother used to say, "Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." Looking back, she realized how true those words were. Here was someone who, despite whatever circumstances had led her to that doorway, maintained her dignity and found escape in the pages of books. The weekend passed slowly. Rachel found herself thinking about the woman, wondering if she had somewhere to go when it rained, if she had anyone looking out for her. Monday couldn't come soon enough. Rachel had made up her mind to break through the invisible barrier that separated their worlds. She knew this moment would change something, though she couldn't have guessed just how significant that change would be. Sometimes the biggest turning points in our lives come disguised as small decisions, tiny moments of choosing to see beyond our usual patterns and routines. As Sunday evening drew to a close, Rachel packed her bag for the next day, adding an extra sandwich and an old paperback book she thought the woman might enjoy. She didn't know it yet, But this simple preparation would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only her life, but the lives of many others in ways she could never have imagined. The story of Rachel and the mysterious woman in the doorway was about to take an unexpected turn, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary chapters of our lives begin with the simplest acts of human kindness. Monday morning arrived with a gentle drizzle, the kind that makes the city streets glisten. Rachel walked her usual route, this time with butterflies in her stomach. She carried not just her regular morning coffee, but an extra cup and the carefully packed sandwich she'd prepared the night before. As she approached the familiar doorway, her heart sank a little. It was empty. The spot where the mysterious woman usually sat was vacant, showing only traces of dampness from the morning rain. Rachel stood there for a moment, feeling oddly disappointed, when a voice behind her made her turn. "Good morning," came a gentle voice. There she was, standing under the awning of the neighboring shop, trying to stay dry. The woman's voice was soft but clear, carrying the kind of warmth you might hear from a favorite teacher or a kind librarian. Rachel's nervousness melted away as she smiled and held out the coffee cup. "I thought you might like something warm on a morning like this," she said, surprised by how natural it felt. The woman's eyes lit up, not just at the offer of coffee, but at the simple act of being seen, of being acknowledged as a person rather than a fixture of the street. "That's very kind of you," the woman said, accepting the cup with graceful hands. "I'm Catherine," she added, introducing herself with the poise of someone hosting a dinner party rather than sheltering from the rain in a doorway. Rachel introduced herself too, and before she knew it, they were having a real conversation. She offered the sandwich as well, which Catherine accepted with genuine gratitude. There was something about the way she held herself, even while accepting help, that maintained her dignity completely intact. As they talked, Rachel learned that Catherine's taste in books ranged from classic literature to modern science texts. The tattered paperback she'd been reading was a well-worn copy of a physics book. "The universe is full of mysteries," Catherine had said with a slight smile, "and sometimes it's nice to lose herself in them." Their conversation flowed easily, touching on books they'd both read and places they'd both visited. Catherine spoke about Paris in a way that made it clear she'd been there herself, describing the hidden cafes and lesser-known museums, with the detail that only comes from personal experience. The morning rush continued around them, people hurrying past with their heads down, focused on their phones or their destinations. Rachel realized she used to be just like them, moving through her days without really seeing the lives intersecting with her own. Before she knew it, 20 minutes had passed. Rachel normally would have been at her desk by now, sorting through her morning emails. But somehow, this conversation felt more important than being perfectly on time. Still, she knew she had to go. "I should head to work," Rachel said reluctantly. "But would it be okay if I stopped by again tomorrow?" The question came out naturally, without any of the hesitation she'd felt earlier. Catherine's face brightened. "I would like that very much," she replied. Then, with a hint of mischief in her eyes, she added, "I'll be here, same office, same time." Her ability to joke about her situation spoke volumes about her spirit. As Rachel walked away, she felt lighter somehow. The simple act of reaching out, of making a human connection, had already changed something in her. She thought about how many times she must have walked past people without seeing them, without considering their stories. Throughout her workday, Rachel found herself thinking about Catherine. There was clearly so much more to her story: the way she spoke, her knowledge of books and travel, her impeccable manners. How did someone like that end up spending their days in a doorway? The question nagged at her, but she knew better than to pry too quickly. That evening, while making dinner, Rachel put together another sandwich for the next day. She found herself choosing ingredients more carefully than usual, making sure everything was fresh and thoughtful. She also picked out another book from her shelf, one she thought Catherine might enjoy. As she prepared for bed that night, Rachel reflected on how strange life could be. Just yesterday, Catherine had been a stranger she passed on the street. Now, she found herself looking forward to their next conversation, curious about the stories and wisdom this unexpected friend might share. The next morning couldn't come fast enough. Rachel woke up earlier than usual, took extra care with her morning routine, and even stopped at her favorite coffee shop to get 2 of their special breakfast blend coffees. Something told her Catherine would appreciate the subtle flavors. Walking down the street, Rachel saw the world differently now. She noticed other people she'd previously overlooked. The elderly man who sold newspapers on the corner, the young artist who set up her easel near the park, the delivery woman who seemed to know everyone by name. Each of them had their own story, their own universe of experiences. As she approached Catherine's doorway, Rachel felt none of the nervousness from the day before. Instead, she felt something else. A sense of anticipation, like she was about to continue reading a fascinating book that she'd had to put down at the most interesting part. What Rachel didn't know yet was that this second meeting would lead to revelations that would shake her understanding of fate, success, and the threads that connect all our lives. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest gestures: a cup of coffee, a shared sandwich, a moment of genuine human connection. The city bustled around them, but in that doorway, a unique friendship was blossoming, one that would soon change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. And it all started with the courage to stop to see and to reach out with a simple gift on a rainy Monday morning. Over the next few days, Rachel and Catherine's morning conversations became longer and deeper. They'd settled into a comfortable routine, sharing coffee and breakfast while discussing everything from current events to philosophy. But it was on a particularly sunny Friday morning when Catherine began to share glimpses of her past. "I used to work just 2 blocks from here," Catherine mentioned casually, gesturing toward the gleaming office buildings that dominated the skyline. Rachel noticed how Catherine's eyes lingered on one building in particular, the Thompson Financial Center, one of the city's most prestigious business addresses. As they sat together on a nearby bench that Catherine had discovered was perfect for their morning chats, she began to unfold her story. 20 years ago, I was leading strategy for some of the biggest companies in the country," she said, her voice carrying no bitterness, just a gentle reflection of memories. Rachel listened intently as Catherine described her former life. She had been a highly sought-after business consultant, known for turning struggling companies around. Her office had been on the 47th floor, with a view that stretched all the way to the ocean. The way Catherine described complex business strategies and corporate finance made it clear she wasn't exaggerating. "But life has a way of throwing unexpected curves," Catherine continued, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. "It started with a market crash that wiped out most of my savings. I thought I could recover. I'd always been good with money. But then my husband got sick." Rachel noticed how Catherine's hands tightened slightly around her coffee cup as she spoke about her husband. The medical bills came fast and furious. Insurance covered some, but the experimental treatments he needed weren't included. We spent everything we had trying to save him. The morning crowd rushed past them, absorbed in their own worlds, as Catherine shared how she had gone from corner office to street corner. After her husband's passing, a series of unfortunate events snowballed. The grief affected her work performance. Her company was going through downsizing. She lost her job, then her house, and finally her connection with her only daughter. "The hardest part wasn't losing the money or the house," Catherine said, her voice steady but soft. "It was losing touch with my daughter. We had a disagreement about how I handled everything. She thought I was being foolish, spending all our resources on treatments that might not work. Maybe she was right, but when you love someone..." Rachel found herself blinking back tears, moved by the raw honesty in Catherine's voice. Here was someone who had once commanded boardrooms and guided million-dollar decisions, now finding peace in borrowed books and kind gestures. "But you know what's strange?" Catherine continued, a hint of her natural optimism returning. "Sitting here, watching the city move around me, I've learned more about human nature than I ever did from my corner office. People are surprising. Some walk past like you're invisible, others share whatever they have, even when it's very little." As the morning sun climbed higher, Catherine shared more details about her former life. She described the thrill of saving failing businesses, of helping people keep their jobs and support their families. Her eyes lit up when she talked about the creative solutions she'd developed for complex business problems. "I still keep up with the business world," she admitted, pulling out a slightly wrinkled newspaper from her bag. "Old habits die hard, I suppose. Sometimes I read about companies facing the same challenges I used to solve. The solution seems so clear to me even now." Rachel was struck by how Catherine analyzed current business news with remarkable insight, pointing out trends and potential solutions that showed her expertise hadn't faded. "Sometimes I write letters to companies with suggestions," Catherine confessed with a small laugh. "I use the library computer. I don't sign my name, of course. Who would listen to advice from?" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Rachel understood the cruel irony of having so much valuable knowledge and experience, yet being in a position where few would take you seriously. "Do you ever think about trying to get back into consulting?" Rachel asked carefully, sensing this might be a sensitive topic. Catherine smiled gently. "The corporate world has changed a lot in recent years. Plus, it's hard to get hired when you don't have a fixed address. But I haven't given up. I'm just waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity. Sometimes life works in mysterious ways." As Rachel prepared to leave for work, Catherine reached into her worn bag and pulled out a small notebook. "I want to show you something," she said, opening it to reveal pages of neat handwriting. "These are my observations about the market, predictions I've made. Some of them have already come true." The pages were filled with detailed analyses and forecasts, written with the precision of a seasoned professional. Rachel was amazed by Catherine's dedication to keeping her skills sharp, despite her circumstances. "Keep learning, keep observing, keep growing. That's what matters," Catherine said, carefully putting the notebook away. "Everything else is temporary, even this situation I'm in now." As Rachel walked to her office that morning, her mind was spinning with everything she'd learned. Catherine's story served as a powerful reminder of how quickly life could change, but also of the resilience of the human spirit. Here was a woman who had lost everything except her dignity, her intelligence, and her hope. What Rachel didn't realize yet was that Catherine's story wasn't over, far from it. The next chapter would unfold in a way that neither of them could have predicted, proving that sometimes life's darkest moments can lead to unexpected new beginnings. The following Monday morning started like any other at Rachel's office. She arrived early after her usual chat with Catherine, settled at her desk, and opened her email. That's when everything changed. The subject line of the company-wide email made her heart skip. UOGNT, all staff meeting, 10 a.m. In their small marketing firm, all staff meetings usually meant one thing: big changes were coming. The last time they'd had one, 3 departments had been cut. The office buzzed with nervous energy. People huddled in small groups, whispering theories and concerns. "I heard we're being bought out," one colleague mentioned. "My friend in accounting says we're nearly bankrupt," another added. Rachel thought about Catherine's recent comments about corporate strategy, wishing she could ask her opinion now. As employees filed into the main conference room, Rachel noticed unfamiliar faces at the front, people in expensive suits who carried themselves with the confidence of success. The room felt charged with anticipation and anxiety. Their CEO, Mr. Wong, stepped forward, his face unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady but tired. "As many of you know, our company has been facing significant challenges over the past year. Today, I have an important announcement." Rachel held her breath, thinking about her mortgage, her bills, the morning coffees she shared with Catherine. How ironic that she might soon be joining her friend on the streets. But Mr. Wong's next words surprised everyone. "I'm pleased to announce that Sterling Industries has acquired our company," he said, a smile finally breaking through. "This isn't just a buyout. It's a partnership that will save all our jobs and create new opportunities for growth." The tension in the room immediately transformed into relief. People started exchanging hopeful glances and small smiles, but the biggest surprise was yet to come. "The CEO of Sterling Industries will be here shortly to address you all," Mr. Wong continued. "She's been very interested in our company's potential and has some exciting plans for our future." Right on cue, the conference room door opened. A woman in her mid-30s entered, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. Rachel noticed how everyone straightened in their chairs, impressed by her commanding presence, but there was something familiar about her face, something that made Rachel lean forward in her chair. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Linda Morrison, CEO of Sterling Industries," she began. Her voice carried the same gentle strength that Rachel had heard somewhere before. "I've been watching your company for some time, particularly impressed by your creative approach to client solutions." As Linda spoke about her vision for the company's future, Rachel's mind was racing. The resemblance was striking. The same graceful hand gestures, the same thoughtful way of speaking. Could it be possible? The meeting continued with Linda outlining their expansion plans, new markets they would target, and the additional resources they would receive. But Rachel barely heard any of it. She was too busy connecting dots in her mind, remembering pieces of Catherine's story. After the meeting, as people filed out discussing the exciting news, Rachel lingered behind. She approached Linda, who was gathering her papers. "Miss Morrison," Rachel started, her heart pounding. "This might sound strange, but is your mother's name Catherine?" Linda froze. The papers in her hands trembled slightly. "How do you know that name?" she asked, her professional demeanor cracking just a bit. Rachel took a deep breath and described Catherine, her dignity, her business insights, her current situation. With each detail, Linda's eyes grew wider. When Rachel mentioned the silver chain Catherine always wore, Linda reached for her neck, pulling out an identical necklace from beneath her blouse. "I've been searching for her for 3 years," Linda whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "After our fight, after she disappeared. I've hired private investigators, searched homeless shelters, everything. Where is she?" "She's 2 blocks away," Rachel replied softly. "She's there every morning, reading business papers and writing market analyses in her notebook. She never stopped being who she was." Linda sank into a nearby chair, overwhelming emotions playing across her face. "All this time she was so close," she said. "I've walked past that street countless times, probably rushed right by her, focused on my phone or my next meeting." Rachel watched as Linda struggled to maintain her composure. Would you help me?" Linda asked, suddenly sounding less like a powerful CEO and more like a daughter who missed her mother. "I don't want to just show up and overwhelm her. Maybe you could help me approach her." The rest of Rachel's workday passed in a blur. She and Linda made plans for the next morning, when worlds would collide and a 3-year separation would finally end. As Rachel walked home that evening, she thought about how life could change in an instant, sometimes for the worse, but sometimes wonderfully for the better. What she didn't know yet was that tomorrow would bring even more surprises. Catherine's business instincts hadn't just helped her survive, they were about to reshape the future of an entire company, proving that wisdom can come from the most unexpected places. The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Rachel arrived at her usual meeting spot with Catherine earlier than normal, carrying 3 coffees instead of 2. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked, knowing what was about to unfold. Catherine was already there, sitting on their usual bench, her worn notebook open on her lap. She looked up with a warm smile that quickly turned to concern when she saw Rachel's nervous expression. "You seem troubled this morning," Catherine said, closing her notebook. After weeks of conversations, she had become quite good at reading Rachel's moods. Rachel sat down, placing the coffee carrier between them. "Catherine," she began carefully, "something happened at work yesterday. Something I need to tell you about." She explained about the company meeting, the acquisition, and finally, about meeting Linda. Catherine's face went completely still. The only movement was her hand, which unconsciously reached for the silver chain around her neck. "Linda," she whispered, as if saying the name might make her daughter vanish. "You met my Linda?" "She's been looking for you," Rachel said gently. "For 3 years, she's been searching everywhere. And she'd like to see you, if you're willing." Rachel gestured down the street, where Linda stood waiting anxiously, just out of sight. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I've imagined this moment so many times," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've rehearsed what I would say, how I would explain everything. But now that it's real," she trailed off, overwhelmed by emotion. "Would you like me to wave her over?" Rachel asked softly. Catherine nodded, unable to speak. Rachel raised her hand, and Linda began walking toward them. She had deliberately dressed simply today, wearing a casual sweater instead of her usual power suit. As she approached, Catherine slowly stood up, her legs shaking slightly. Time seemed to stop as mother and daughter faced each other for the first time in 3 years. Linda took in her mother's worn clothes and thin frame, while Catherine saw the successful woman her daughter had become. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Linda broke the silence. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. So wrong." She reached for her mother's hands, and Catherine pulled her into a tight embrace. Rachel quietly stepped away, giving them privacy for their reunion. From a distance, she watched as they sat together on the bench, talking through tears and laughter, 3 years of separation dissolving in a flood of words and emotions. After about an hour, Rachel saw them beckoning her back. Both women's eyes were red from crying, but they were smiling. "Rachel," Linda said, "Mom has been telling me about your morning conversations, about her market analyses and business observations." Catherine looked slightly embarrassed. "Just an old habit I couldn't break," she said. "Mom," Linda replied, "I read some of your anonymous letters. The ones you sent to struggling companies. 3 of them followed your suggestions and turned their businesses around. Your instincts are as sharp as ever." Catherine's eyes widened. "You recognize my work?" Linda nodded. "I knew it had to be you. Nobody else thinks quite the way you do. That's actually part of why I bought this company. I saw potential here that reminded me of your business style." Rachel watched as Catherine processed this information. "The market analysis in my notebook," she began hesitantly. "I'd like to see it," Linda said. "And I'd like to offer you a position at Sterling Industries as our chief strategy consultant." Catherine sat back stunned. "But I've been homeless for 3 years. Who would take me seriously?" "Anyone who knows business would take you seriously," Linda insisted. "Your insights are invaluable. Plus, I own the company now. I can hire whoever I want." She smiled. "And I want my mother back, both in my life and in my business." Rachel watched as hope bloomed across Catherine's face, but then uncertainty crept in. "Where would I live? How would I?" "We'll figure it all out together," Linda assured her. "I have a guest house you can use while you get back on your feet. We have so much time to make up for, Mom." As mother and daughter continued planning their future, Rachel marveled at how life could change so dramatically in just 24 hours. Catherine had gone from homeless to having both a home and a job, but more importantly, she had regained her daughter. Later that morning, as Rachel walked into the office, she saw Catherine and Linda in the conference room, heads bent together over Catherine's notebook. Through the glass, she could see them pointing at different pages, discussing strategies with the easy familiarity of 2 professionals who spoke the same language. What happened next would transform not just their company, but the way many businesses thought about second chances and hidden talent. Catherine's story would inspire others to look beyond appearances, to see the potential in people's society often overlooked. The transformation in Catherine's life happened swiftly but thoughtfully. Within a week, she had moved into Linda's guest house, traded her worn clothes for a new wardrobe, and begun the process of rebuilding her life. But Catherine hadn't forgotten where she'd come from or the people she'd met during her time on the streets. On her first official day at Sterling Industries, Catherine didn't head straight to her new corner office. Instead, she asked Linda to meet her at the local homeless shelter. "Before we start changing businesses," Catherine said, "I want to show you something important." The shelter was busy that morning. People lined up for breakfast, some heading to work programs, others seeking help with job applications. Catherine greeted many by name, stopping to chat with each one. Linda watched in amazement as her mother moved through the crowd, treating everyone with the same respect she'd show a CEO. "See that man?" Catherine pointed out a middle-aged man helping serve breakfast. "He used to be a software engineer, lost everything in a divorce and depression, but he still knows coding better than most graduates I've interviewed." She turned to another person, and she was an accountant before medical bills bankrupted her family. Linda began to understand what her mother was suggesting. "You want to create a program," she said slowly, "to help these people get back into the workforce." Catherine nodded. "Not just any program. A real second chance initiative. Professional clothing, skill refresher courses, mental health support, whatever they need to rebuild their lives. The talent here is incredible, just waiting for an opportunity." That conversation sparked the beginning of what would become Sterling Industries' most innovative program, the Fresh Start Initiative. Catherine led the project, using her own experience to shape its approach. She understood both worlds now, the corporate boardroom and the street corner, and knew how to bridge them. Rachel watched the program unfold from her marketing department. Within months, Sterling Industries had hired 15 people from the shelter, each carefully matched to positions that used their skills. The software engineer now led their department. The former accountant was already streamlining their financial processes. But Catherine didn't stop there. she began reaching out to other companies, sharing the success stories, showing them the untapped potential they were overlooking. Her presentations were powerful because she could speak from both sides of the experience. When I was homeless, she would tell rooms full of executives, I didn't stop being a business strategist. I didn't lose my skills or my intelligence, I just lost my platform. How many others are out there, brilliant minds just waiting for a chance to contribute again? The impact rippled through the business community. Other companies began launching their own second chance programs. The local news picked up the story, featuring interviews with successful program participants. Catherine's vision was becoming a reality. One morning, as Rachel walked to work, she passed the doorway where she'd first met Catherine. A small plaque had been installed there. Sometimes the greatest opportunities come from simply stopping to see another person's potential. It had been Linda's idea, a reminder of where their journey began. The office culture at Sterling Industries had changed too. People who might have once walked past a homeless person without a glance now stopped to talk, to share resources, to see the human being behind the circumstance. Catherine's story had opened their eyes and their hearts. During lunch breaks, Catherine could often be found in the company cafeteria, sitting with both executives and former shelter residents, breaking down the invisible barriers that usually separated different levels of employees. She had a way of making everyone feel equally valuable, equally heard. Linda watched her mother with pride and amazement. You've created something extraordinary here, she told Catherine one evening as they reviewed the program's success metrics. We're not just changing lives, we're changing how people think about second chances. Catherine smiled, touching the silver chain she still wore. I had a lot of time to think while I was on the streets, she said. I saw so much wasted potential, so many brilliant minds pushed aside because of circumstances. Success isn't just about making money, it's about lifting others up as you climb. The Fresh Start Initiative's success caught the attention of business magazines and news outlets. But Catherine was careful about how the story was told. This isn't about charity, she would insist. This is about smart business. We're not just giving people jobs, we're investing in valuable human capital that others have overlooked. Rachel's role evolved too. She became the program's marketing director, sharing success stories and helping other companies understand the benefits of second chance hiring. Her morning coffee ritual with Catherine continued, but now they often met in Catherine's office, planning new ways to expand the program's reach. As autumn turned to winter, Catherine organized a special dinner event. She invited everyone from the shelter who had helped her during her time there, along with all the program participants, current and future. The company's elegant conference room was transformed into a warm gathering space where people from all walks of life shared meals and stories. This is what success really looks like, Catherine said in her speech that evening, gesturing to the diverse crowd. Not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but lives transformed, dignity restored, communities strengthened. Looking around the room, Rachel could hardly believe how much had changed since that first morning when she decided to stop and offer a simple cup of coffee. Catherine's story had become more than just a tale of personal redemption. It was proving that business success and social responsibility could go hand in hand. 1 year after that fateful morning, when Rachel first offered Catherine a cup of coffee, Sterling Industries hosted a special anniversary celebration. The company's largest conference room was filled with success stories, people whose lives had been transformed through the Fresh Start Initiative. The room buzzed with energy as Catherine took the stage. She wore a simple but elegant suit, her silver chain still visible at her neck. But what stood out most was her smile, the same warm, dignified expression Rachel had first noticed in that doorway a year ago. When I was homeless, Catherine began, her voice clear and strong. I used to watch people rush past me every morning, heads down, focused on their own busy lives. I don't blame them, I used to be just like that myself. But then one person stopped. One person took the time to see me as a human being, not just a problem to hurry past. Rachel felt tears welling up as Catherine continued. That simple act of kindness didn't just change my life. It started a chain reaction that has now helped over 200 people rebuild their lives. Today, we're not just celebrating my story, we're celebrating everyone who found their second chance. The statistics were impressive. The Fresh Start Initiative had expanded to 30 different companies across the city. Over 80% of participants were now employed in positions that matched their skills and experience. But the numbers didn't tell the whole story. There was Michael, the former software engineer, whom now led coding workshops for other program participants. Anna, the accountant, had become a mentor to new hires, helping them readjust to corporate life. Each success story sparked another, creating a growing network of support and opportunity. Linda joined her mother on stage, beaming with pride. A year ago, our company was struggling. Today, we're not just profitable, we're changing how business thinks about human potential. Our program participants have brought new perspectives, innovative solutions, and an incredible work ethic to every department they've joined. The initiative had grown beyond just hiring. Catherine had developed partnerships with local colleges, offering education programs to help people update their skills. Mental health services and housing assistance became part of the standard support package. The program treated people as whole human beings, not just potential employees. Rachel's marketing team had documented dozens of success stories, sharing them through social media and business networks. Other cities were starting to take notice, reaching out to learn how they could implement similar programs. But Catherine's favorite part of the program wasn't the high-profile success stories, it was the small moments of dignity restored. Like when a participant received their first business card, or when someone moved into their own apartment after months in the shelter. These quiet victories meant as much to her as the bigger achievements. During the celebration, Catherine unveiled the next phase of the initiative, a mentorship program pairing successful participants with new ones. Who better to guide someone through this journey, she explained, than someone who has walked the same path. The day's biggest surprise came when the mayor arrived, announcing that the city would be adopting Catherine's model for all its employment programs. This approach works because it recognizes that homelessness doesn't erase a person's skills, experience, or potential, the mayor said. It just temporarily hides them from view. After the formal ceremony, Catherine, Linda, and Rachel sat together in Catherine's office, sharing coffee just like they used to do on that street corner. The view from the 47th floor was spectacular, but Catherine kept a photo of her old doorway on her desk, a reminder of where this journey began. You know what still amazes me? Catherine said, looking at the photo. How close I was to giving up hope that morning. If Rachel hadn't stopped, she didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood how differently things might have turned out. Linda squeezed her mother's hand. But she did stop. And look at all the good that's come from that one moment. Rachel thought about how many lives had been touched by that simple decision to see the person behind the circumstance. The Fresh Start initiative wasn't just about giving people jobs, it was about restoring their sense of worth, their place in the community, their hope for the future. As they looked out over the city, Catherine pointed to various buildings where program participants now worked. Every one of those lights represents a story, she said. Every office might hold someone who just needs a chance to shine again. The program's success had proved something important, that kindness and good business weren't opposing forces. By investing in overlooked talent, companies could do well while doing good. It was a lesson that was spreading far beyond one company or one city. As the sun set on their celebration day, Catherine shared her vision for the future. The Fresh Start initiative would continue growing, reaching more cities, changing more lives. But she never wanted it to lose its heart, the simple human connection that started it all. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes, Catherine said, raising her coffee cup in a toast. Here's to stopping, to seeing, and to giving everyone a chance to start fresh. Rachel looked at her friend, no longer the homeless woman in the doorway, but a powerful force for change, and marveled at how life could transform when people chose to see the potential in each other. It was a reminder that every day brought new opportunities to make a difference, one simple act of kindness at a time. The story of Rachel and Catherine had become more than just a tale of individual success. It had grown into a movement, proving that when we look past appearances and circumstances, we often find unexpected gifts, wisdom, talent, and the power to change not just one life, but many. And it all started with a cup of coffee and the courage to stop and say hello.